The Dino market is very different now than it was in years past.
I'm too young to remember, but I'm sure you're old enough.
I appreciate that, Jose. They made an impactful moment in television history with most Americans.
The Dino has become one of the most collectible cars.
She's dating a 20-something-year-old guy, so God bless her.
04036 was her first Dino.
Correct. This is the Dino that she took delivery of.
And there's a story out of a cutout of a newspaper or magazine where it says she ripped a piece off of her dress.
Sonny and Cher were known for having matching cars. This is the 70s when the oil crisis were hitting. The story is that back when these were being built, Ferrari lost money on them.
Cher sitting on a hood of a Dino.
There is a child in that photo. That is actually the actress Tatum O'Neal.
Very wealthy guy by the name of Chris Cord.
Did he help her sell the car when her new car came in?
I mean, we put one photo out and immediately.
And originally, the name of a 308 GTB was going to be a Dino GT8. Impossible to find.
Hi, my name is Jose Romero. I'm the sales manager at Driver Source. Today we're going to talk about this very special 1972 Ferrari 246 Dino GTS. I brought my good friend Sean Spear, who's a passionate Dino owner and is going to talk to me about this beautiful car today.
Jose, thanks for having me. We've known each other for, goodness, 15 years, and I've seen you guys sell so many Dinos, and I know y'all know a lot about them. For you to invite me by to stop and take a look at this Dino, which I know I've seen before a couple of years ago, I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you.
Well, we're glad you can make it. Sean, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into this whole Dino world?
I got involved in Dinos because it was the car that I saw when I was in high school and I fell in love with. And I still have that car to this day. It took me 13 years to track it down. My wife bought it for me as a Christmas present, unbeknownst to me. But I've had 5 Dinos at one point in time. And the Dino market is very different now than it was in years past. But I became hardcore into trying to find out information about Dinos, everything from ownership items, ownership records, and all this stuff is always an adventure that you can never find out enough. But some cars are unique that they have all this stuff fully documented and have all the things that go along with them that just add to the cool story.
And you've owned several Dinos, not just the one. You've had multiple, and now you've got...
Currently, I have 3 Dinos. I have a GT and 2 GTSs, but to me, they're just beautiful cars. There's not anything that if I could trade it for, I want more. So I love my Dinos, and for me, I've kept them for a long time. The most recent one I got was 19 years ago, and it's still with me.
What do you know about the history of this car? What do you know about the history of Cher Bono, Sonny Bono, the pop duo? I'm too young to remember, but I'm sure you're old enough.
I appreciate that, Jose. One thing that I think is important to talk about Sonny and Cher is at the time of the late 60s and 70s, they were known as a musical act, but then they also had a television show that was a variety show.
And this is circa early 70s.
Early 70s.
Yeah.
And if you look at the number of guests they had, they made an impactful moment in television history with most Americans. Most people remember watching this show either as kids or adults. But even today, even though Sonny has passed away, Cher is still one of those people who's a music icon.
She's definitely an icon.
She still sings, she still performs.
Very relevant.
She's very relevant. She's dating a 20-something-year-old guy. So God bless her. I mean, for someone to be in that industry for that long and endure the way they have, it speaks quality to the level of work that they put out, the things that they're committed to, and the things that mean a lot to them.
And we know from documents that you've gathered, historical information that we've gathered through several Ferrari historians, through our friend Matthias Barris, Marcel Massini, plus some paperwork documents that you have in your collection. We know that Cher definitely owned 2 Dinos, possibly 3. The third one was probably changed during the order or before. She may have not taken delivery. But this car, this 1972 04036 was her first Dino.
Correct. This is the Dino that she took delivery of and had for a couple of years until her and Sonny got divorced. There's another Dino that's kind of uncertain as to did they ever own it or not. If they did, it was only for a matter of days or weeks. But then there was a third Dino, which is actually what I'm going to call the second Cher Dino. It's a Dino that she had for a long period of time after that. So obviously, with people in the music industry, people who are highly visible, Sonny and Cher were known for having matching cars. They were known for having custom cars. They were known for doing lots of stuff as part of this variety show that allowed them to kind of showcase cool and trendy things that were coming from California and spreading across the United States. But this is the Cher car that she originally bought. And one thing that's unique about this car too is you have documentation from the delivery of the car up until current day. I have some of the original dealership and distributorship documentation that just goes in to confirm everything that we already known by this original documentation. And as you start looking at this as a fully documented car with celebrity ownership, it's one of those cars that at the time you have to remember, this is the 70s when the oil crisis were hitting. Cars went from being very popular as sports cars in the late 60s and early 70s, and then suddenly nobody could afford fuel. Granted, if you're in Hollywood, a little different animal, but a lot of these cars didn't really move back in those days. For someone to own this and hold on to it and cherish it, especially someone who loved cars and changed cars frequently, that's a pretty impressive thing when you're talking somebody who is known as an icon of style, known for that one dress that she wore to one of the events where it set everything on fire on the press and the media and the journalists.
So there's documentation that we found where Cher would take her Ferraris or her other cars to George Barris and have them painted. And there's a story out of a cutout of a newspaper or magazine where it says she ripped a piece off of her dress and gave it to George Barris and had him paint her Ferrari this color. It was a light blue turquoise.
Correct.
We believe that this is that car.
And I 100% believe that too. And here's why. If you look at this car, it is restored in the original colors, red over black. But if you look at the second Dino that Cher had, the one that we know for certain she had, it was new from the factory in blue. So why would you take a blue car and repaint it blue? The story with George Barris is George Barris did the Sonny and Cher matching Mustangs, as well as other cars that they painted very interesting colors by today's standard. But in the 70s, these were the it colors to have.
So there's a photo of Cher getting into a Dino GTS somewhere in Hollywood. It's a black and white photo.
Now, the question is she getting in or is she getting out? But that one of her in the car, there is a child in that photo. That is actually the actress Tatum O'Neal because they were starring in a movie together at the same time.
Oh, interesting. There's also another photo of Cher sitting on a hood of a Dino.
Correct. And that one, we don't know who's in that picture with her. But if you notice both of those pictures, they have pinstriping on the Dino. But we believe that that is actually the second Dino that she owned because the windshield wipers, they actually move side to side. The first Dino she owned, this Dino, you'll notice that they have the clapper style windshield wipers. So it's easy to identify by looking at the photos, which is which.
Now, interestingly, and we just found this out, Cher was on the cover of People magazine in February of 1975.
Correct.
There are photos of her in that photo shoot where many people, if you look at the People magazine cover, you don't realize she's actually leaning on a Ferrari Dino.
Well, if you stare really closely, you can make out a shadow, but that image is cropped. There's actually more to that image than what the cover of People magazine shows.
So we found the uncropped image. It's a blue Dino, which we believe to be this car. That image dates to sometime in 1974. All this history and pedigree just adds to the aura of this car.
Well, it's like a lot of Dinos. There's a mystery involved. This is the Dino that she bought off the showroom floor. And it makes more sense for the George Barris story when the story that he tells that she tore off part of the dress, gave it to him and said, match this car or color. That actually matches with all the stories of the Sonny and Cher cars that they had painted.
So now we fast forward to 1974. Okay. And the story about this Dino gets even more interesting. And I just recently found this out too. In 1974, Cher and Sonny started having marital problems. It's about the time that they started separating or getting a divorce. Cher gives the car to a Beverly Hills playboy, very wealthy guy by the name of Chris Cord. So Chris Cord, we have documentation that he owned the car in 74, registered in Nevada.
Correct. And Cord has owned numerous Ferraris, everything you can think of from a GTO to even a Dino that was only a couple serial numbers away from Cher's Dino, this car. So did he help her sell the car when her new car came in? He did take possession of it, but he's the one that sold it to the next owner.
Or did she give the car to him out of spite, getting a divorce from Sonny?
It's
hey,
a mystery.
I don't want this car anymore, sell it. And then later she would have bought her second or third Dino.
Which logically makes sense.
Right. So we have a brief history with Cher, a brief history with Chris Cord, both of them celebrities. The third owner, Donald McDonald, He's an architect in San Francisco, and his body of work includes the Golden Gate Bridge, the Bay Bridge. He's done some magnificent buildings around the world, bridges around the U.S. He's still with us today. I actually spoke with him recently, and he had a lot of cool stories to tell me about this car. Interesting fact is that, as you remember, Sean, we purchased this car from McDonald through a broker in 2013.
Correct.
And it was a garage find. The bumpers and all the chrome fixtures had been painted black.
It was a very interesting color combination.
Yeah, and he owned the car for nearly 40 years. We got the car in 2013. We got it running. We got it back on the road. I think you came back then and looked at it.
I did. I remember it from back then.
And then during the course of us deciding back then, are we going to restore the car? What are we going to do with it? I mean, we put one photo out and immediately somebody wanted to buy the car. I'm not
surprised by that. The amount of documentation and historical items that this Dino has, forget about who the celebrity associated with. It's very unusual. Original warranty cards, impossible to find. You can't recreate something that was specific to a serial number, and most people threw them away over the years. It's the fact that this Dino had the same owner for almost 40 years. And I'm not surprised he's an architect, because if you look at these Dinos, the number of people that are in design, car design, names that you would know, architectural design, engineers, these are people who this type of design appeals to because they're looking at the pinnacle of design. And I think that's really what the Dino speaks volume about.
Being an architect, good record keeping, organized.
Absolutely.
And this is why the car retains, I mean, we've got the original pink slip with Cher's name on it and her Hollywood
home
address.
address.
Yes. We've got Chris Cord's registration. We got his registration back in 75. I mean, this is truly a long-term owner car that's been really well cared for. But the documentation, I mean, we're nerds about these things, and we can really appreciate that.
But it's also more importantly, when Dinos didn't have a lot of value during the period of the late 70s to the early 80s, they weren't really considered by most people to be a Ferrari. They were considered to be something less than, or the famous marketing campaign, the almost a Ferrari. So people would call it, when I first got involved in Dinos, people would give me grief saying, oh, you have the girl's Ferrari, or you have a Fiat. The world has changed in terms of that, but think of how many of these cars were left outside. They really didn't have a lot of value. They weren't so much abused, but they were neglected by people not having the money to spend because the value was so little, it didn't make financial sense.
And you fast forward now to today, they remade the Dino, Ferrari did. Mm-hmm. The opening scene of the Ferrari movie is his son Dino, kind of a memoir to him.
For sure.
Which that's why this car was born. So I found that the Dino has become one of the most collectible cars in all over the world. We get calls daily about Dinos. People know that we love these cars. We hunt for them on the daily. You and I have been part of some pretty cool discoveries. So over the last 3 years, I have seen a shift to where the sophisticated collector, the guy who has 100 cars already, but he didn't have a Dino, now he wants one. Or the guy who wants to start off a collection, he wants to start with the Dino. So they have a lot of personality, the colors that they were made, the people they were sold to. It's a very interesting car that's now found its place.
Well, you also have an interesting dynamic that specifically is taking place in the Dino market right now. If you look at some of the other Enzo era cars from the 50s, 60s, and 70s, I kind of jokingly say the Enzo era is when the chrome bumpers started to disappear. Anything after that is not Enzo era. But the Dino is specific because the number of buyers under the age of 50 is unlike any other vintage Ferrari that I know. These are guys who have had new modern production cars, and they want to have something that's a cool classic, that's easy to drive, that's easy to maintain, and the fun factor is there. You can jump in a Dino with your kids and take them for Saturday morning donuts. You can do things that some of the other cars, yes, they have more horsepower, they have more torque, they have design, they have style, but they're not the Dino.
I always compare the Dino to an early Porsche 911. Oh, it's very usable. It's very user friendly. It's really well in maintenance. I mean, you don't spend.
And you're seeing a lot of people in today's world that are Porsche people, and the Ferrari people and Porsche people don't always mix, but a lot of Porsche people stepping into specifically to become a Dino buyer. And part of that is because the familiarity that they have with the Porsche,
The simplicity,
the beautiful part of the design, the engineering, how well balanced it is, how it handles. Keep in mind, the 308 series, not the GT4, but the GTB, followed the Dino 246. And originally, the name of a 308 GTB was going to be a Dino GT8.
So back to this car, I mean, we talked about the documentation. Some of the stuff we've gathered recently is the memorabilia with Cher.
Which is super cool.
She bought the car in 1972, December.
Correct.
That same month, same year, she was on the cover of Vogue magazine.
Correct. Which gives you an idea of how well known and recognized she was at this point in her career.
I think this was the catapult of her fame.
Absolutely.
You know, this was her era. We have the People magazine issue from February 75. We also have a vinyl record with her and Sonny from dated 1972, which would have been their last record together.
Correct.
So all this memorabilia, we have the Dino Compendium book, which your name is in the credits. You know, there's so much here for the sophisticated Dino buyer, the sophisticated collector, but also if it's your first car, if you're starting a collection, you're starting with something that is very special.
Well, you have something that, let's take a step back to 10 years ago. This Dino has something that is, yes, the pedigree, it has the documentation, but now it's also been sympathetically restored and it presents itself as a brand new type car. Whereas years ago, it was something that was well loved, well used. And yes, there was some patina that was there, but you wouldn't want to jump in it and feel proud that you're driving something that almost looks like it drove off the showroom floor in 1972. And that's what this Dino represents today.
Another interesting fact, when I spoke with Donald McDonald, who, like we said, had this car for nearly 4 decades, he's a taller guy. So he changed the steering wheel to a smaller diameter, still the steering wheel that it has today. It just kind of, that adds to the kind of personality of the car. You know, that's something that the long-term owner put on the car.
But it shows it was being driven.
Correct.
And one other thing too is the original Dino steering wheel. If somebody hasn't seen one of those, the spoke itself, the rim, is about the width of your pinky. And so these things would break all the time. They just simply shear off because there's no power steering. Yes, the Dino's easy to drive, but if you're in a parking lot and you start, the torque would just break the steering wheel. So a lot of those steering wheels were tossed from back in the day. So because of that, it's not abnormal to see Dino steering wheels that aren't the original Dino steering wheel. And the fact that he put in a thicker rim for the steering wheel, it shows that he was driving it.
And they're readily available if you wanted to go
absolutely.
back.
You can find them, and they're not much money. They look super cool. But the one that's on here is actually a Momo Prototipi. That is a period correct steering wheel that a lot of people in the day fitted because of the thickness of the rim that it wouldn't break.
Another thing about this car, you know, Dino's had body numbers in various areas. We've identified the body numbers. We've identified the gearbox number and the engine number to be matching. We've got the original warranty card from your collection. We have the Marcel Massini history report. We have a report from Matthias Barth that wrote the Dino Compendium. We have the Dino Compendium book. I mean, to me, it doesn't get any better to have a car.
This is an opportunity for a turnkey Dino owner experience where you have the things that speak to collectability. This is not going to be a cheap Dino, but you know what? You will spend more time and money trying to track these down and restore it. It's kind of the old adage is you get the car for free if you pay for the restoration. Is these Dinos are very, very special. And that stuff is almost impossible to find. Yes, you can buy a Dino Compendium, and it's a wonderful book, and I recommend it for anybody, even if they're not a Dino owner. But when you look at the documentation, the vehicle registrations from N period, the names on them that add to the history file, if you look at Marcel Massini's report, everything corresponds. And then a one-time owner that had it for 40 years. That's almost unheard of. You don't keep a car for 40 years unless you're in love with it. And the fact that he did structural engineering work and architectural work, it speaks to the quality of how the Dino was put together. The story is that back when these were being built, Ferrari lost money on them. And they were a less expensive car than the Daytona. But if you consider this was a passion project for Ferrari to have a chance to compete with Porsche, is it opened up that door. And if you look back in those days, Ferrari was in financial, not in a good place. They were losing lots of money, and the Dino was one of the reasons for that.